What are your biggest triggers in life? You know, the triggers that have been around for a long time and they just keep manifesting in different ways. We all have something. So, what is it for you? Our triggers are typically the source of our blocks. They hold us back in our relationships and prevent us from moving forward with our goals. Now, let me ask you, what would happen if your triggers weren't so triggering? What if they just got softer and softer to the point where they just didn't bother you at all anymore? If that happened, would your life be any different? Friends, this is exactly what is happening to me from the practice of breathwork. Now, if this sounds magical, I can assure you that it's actually just science, but yes, it also feels magical. In my last episode, I shared with you my journey with breathwork. And if you missed that episode, I will link it in the show notes of this one. In this episode, I want to share with you the greatest benefit that I have seen in practicing breathwork. And it is this: my triggers are radically softening, and some triggers have even disappeared altogether. I have been shocked as some triggers that have plagued me for a lifetime have dramatically softened or even disappeared, almost like the file in my brain was deleted. Talk about life changing. Can you imagine what your life would be like if your biggest triggers were no longer triggering? You were no longer triggered by a certain person. You no longer got angry over a certain pattern. You no longer go into some shame spiral over the same thing. This changes your life because your responses change. We all know that we need to change our negative responses, but it is so hard to do when we're triggered. Our agency to choose a better response is dramatically increased when those triggers become softer and softer. Those better responses then become so easy. I have never had a tool that has so effectively or dramatically healed my triggers as breathwork. And I really started to notice this effect the more dedicated I got with the practice. I've been doing hour-long breathwork sessions once or twice a month for a year now. And I started in hopes that it would help me to heal some intense trauma. In the beginning, I definitely felt in my body that things were changing. Now that I have certified as a somatic breathwork practitioner, I understand the science of how it all works. But even as awesome as knowledge is, learning through experience is always far more potent for me. And it wasn't until a few months ago that I first became consciously aware of one of my triggers completely disappearing. I had done breath work that afternoon, and a few hours later, I was confronted with a potent topic in my family that has historically been deeply triggering for me, and it would have left me feeling disconnected to my people for hours or maybe even days afterward. The family members around me in that moment were all waiting for me to react. This particular situation was a pattern that we all knew really well, and we all play our victim roles every single time. But this time, when I was confronted with the situation, I just sat there stunned. The only way I can describe what happened is that the pathway in my brain had been erased. There was absolutely no reaction available. It was like the file had been deleted from my hard drive and I couldn't speak a reaction. My body didn't react, and I just sat there sort of dumb. And when I think back on this moment in my mind, it's almost comical. I can replay it like we were a group of actors who had a script that we had rehearsed many, many times. And they were playing their parts perfectly, but suddenly I couldn't remember my lines. And they were waiting for me to say the lines that would then lead to the fight scene that came next. But when I couldn't remember my part, we all had to improv something new. In other words, When I didn't play my victim role in the family drama, the other two family members suddenly deflated, and the moment was over as fast as it started. 10 minutes later, we were all talking and laughing like nothing had happened, because nothing had happened. The script went missing. I give credit to the breathwork session that I had done a few hours earlier, as well as the many, many breathwork sessions that I had done leading up to that day. I have contemplated this moment of pattern deletion many times in the past few months. Imagine what would happen in your life if one of your own victim patterns was erased. What would be the ripple effect of one pattern being deleted? In that moment, I saw how impactful even one person in the pattern can be when they interrupt it and they don't participate. And in this case, it wasn't just consciously choosing to not react that made the difference. It was that my body didn't react. The old way had been erased from my neurological memory. And I think that is what had me struck dumb more than anything else. My mind remembered, my body didn't. It didn't make sense to react because my body wasn't reacting, and I was shocked at the lack of response. The longer I have consistently practiced breathwork, the more often I am seeing this type of thing happen, where the trigger is either radically softened and maybe even eventually disappears. And it makes perfect sense scientifically. The very definition of being triggered is that your nervous system responds to something by activating into a stress state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When you do a somatic breathwork session, you spend the first half of your session activating your nervous system with mouth breathing. And then the second half of the session, you regulate your nervous system with nasal breathing. And it's in the second half where the repatterning of the nervous system in the brain actually happens. This is when you're teaching your nervous system that you know how to come back to safety. Now, fast forward to daily life when you encounter something that triggered you in the past, and suddenly it doesn't have the same effect as before. Why? Because your body knows that it doesn't need to treat this like a life or death moment because it knows you're already safe, or it knows you'll return to safety soon, so there's not really a reason to overreact. You've likely heard this statement that's attributed to Viktor Frankl that says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your freedom to choose. For just a moment, I want to talk about this concept and how meditation and breath work are uniquely different in how they create more space between stimulus and response. For me, this is what I have observed in my own practice of both meditation and breath work. So meditation has been a great tool for my mind, whereas breath work has been a great tool for my body. Meditation has helped me to notice, have awareness of my triggers and create more space to better be able to observe them. Whereas breath work has helped to dramatically soften the triggers altogether. Combined, meditation and breath work can be a dynamic duo. So much of my work that I do focuses on the law of creation. And I use this law of creation for both healing the past and creating the future, which then beautifully helps us to love and accept the present moment. Both breathwork and meditation help. And for me personally, breathwork has helped me to heal the past in a way that meditation was much slower to do. So much of what we need to heal is in the body. Nearly all of our physical symptoms actually begin as emotional symptoms. So let's pause for a moment and just focus in on this important need that we all have for healing the past. Most of us spend our days reliving the past. Because our body is carrying emotional wounds and neurological triggers and patterns from our past that continue to play out in our life because we haven't addressed it. Breathwork beautifully allows us to address it without having to go into any of the story. You do have to go into the emotion, but once you feel it, you can heal it. But here's the thing. Most of us don't want to feel the uncomfortable emotions, and we all have our own coping mechanisms specifically designed to avoid feeling any of those feelings. And here again is what I love about breathwork. In a breathwork session, I have a dedicated time to feel and to process. And I am finding that the more I practice breathwork, the more practice I have at allowing myself to feel what I have avoided. And those feelings are becoming less scary. And I'm gaining emotional resiliency and confidence that I can feel uncomfortable and survive. I can feel uncomfortable and not tell a story. I can feel uncomfortable and process it in the moment rather than avoiding it for 40 years until I finally get so traumatized or sick of my patterns that I decide there must be a better way. I find it fascinating to witness how so much of our life is really a version of the past replaying itself over and over again. We've had experiences that became emotionally wounding, and if we didn't fully process the emotional experience when it happened, we then develop a story and beliefs to make sense of the emotions that we're still carrying inside. And those limiting beliefs are what create our limiting patterns. Those patterns can show up in our relationships, in our health, and in our work. So even though technically every day is different, we really are living out the variations of the same blocks over and over again. It's sort of like we're stuck in the past. I have spent years in the pursuit of trying to figure out how to fix myself. I have spent tens of thousands of dollars in courses and programs and reading books, all seeking to find what would finally help me to change. And I didn't understand at the time, but what I was really trying to fix was my triggers. I had triggers to anger. I had triggers to comparison, triggers to judgment, triggers to not feeling good enough, triggers to retreat or hide, triggers to blaming myself, triggers to separating myself from others. Now, I wasn't triggered all of the time, but when I was, I would instantly see it as something being wrong with me. Good people don't feel anger. Good people don't inwardly sulk. Good people celebrate others' success. Good people just love to endlessly serve others and don't feel resentment. I certainly had plenty of conditioning that sung the praises of what a virtuous person is supposed to be, and I was continuously falling short of that ideal because no matter how proactive or spiritual I was, I could not seem to get rid of the darker side of human emotion. It didn't matter if I had a healthy lifestyle, I was still prone to dark emotion. It didn't matter if I was meditating every day. I was still prone to dark emotion. It didn't matter if I followed the letter of the law on any health protocol or spiritual belief system. I was still prone to dark emotion. I was still prone to my patterns. I still got triggered. None of my cultural conditioning taught me that feeling the darker emotions of life was okay, that it was actually a normal part of the human experience, that it wasn't who I was. And I definitely never learned how to process emotion in a way that healed my nervous system. Instead, I learned to stuff it away or retreat so that people wouldn't have to be around me when I felt things too deep or too low. I recently heard Rachel Gibler say on her podcast, "You'll go back to baseline every time you're triggered. You can be doing all of the tools, but you'll go back to baseline every time you're triggered." This explains perfectly what my life has been like. I can be functioning well and trying my best to do all the right things and do the tools and live healthy and think healthy, and all of that can be awesome until I'm triggered. And then I go back to baseline. In the past, the moment that I was bumped back to baseline, I immediately start wondering, what the heck is wrong with me? But the reason that I love this insight so much is that now I believe it's possible to actually raise the baseline. I now believe that it's possible to soften the triggers. Triggers are still going to take us back to baseline, but as those triggers soften, the baseline starts to rise. As we heal our nervous system, the baseline starts to rise. When those triggers are softer, you don't go as low or stay there as long because you're increasing your window of tolerance. You're healing the past so you can truly create a new future and live and love the present moment. So I invite you to pause for a moment right now and just reflect for yourself. What are your own triggers? And what would your life be like if they softened? I'm here to tell you that it's possible. I know because I've experienced it. I love the words of Richard Rudd, who said, "Enlightenment is a series of softenings." I'll say that one more time. Enlightenment is a series of softenings. Isn't that beautiful? What happens when our triggers soften? When our mind softens? When our heart softens? When our judgments soften? When we soften, we access the infinite, unconditional love that is already inside of us. The truth is, we don't need to become anyone different than we already are. We don't need to fix anything. We don't need to learn any secret knowledge. We just need to soften and realize that everything is already here. You are a creator. Feel, be, see, say, and do. The light in me honors the light in you. Dear one, if you resonate with this message and you want to experience the softening of your own triggers in your life, I would love to invite you to attend my next live online breathwork session. You can check the dates for that next one at brooksnow.com/events, or you can click the link in the show notes. You are a creator. Now go co-create something great.